Throughout my adult life, my focus has been on making the world a more beautiful place. Initially, I pursued this goal as a hairstylist, working on the external appearance of individuals to make them feel more beautiful. However, I wanted more, so I began to shift my focus to helping people make better choices and achieve greater beauty from within. As a transformational life coach, I specialize in helping you identify and change the limiting beliefs that may be holding you back. Join me each week as we discuss, interview, teach, and explore the fundamental principles of healthy relationships. Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Louisa. In today's episode of Conscious Conversations with Louisa. Hello, everyone. This is Louisa Jovanovich, and we are here with Conscious Conversations with Louisa on this fabulous podcast, ready to interview one of my most favorite new friends. And I'm so excited to call her a friend because wait till you guys get to know her. You'd want her to be your friend too. YaeL, I am actually going to read this because you're so spectacular. I didn't want to miss a word of this bio. Today's guest is YaeL Lazar, an award-winning tax and estate planning attorney, also known as the IRS Angel. I love that so much. With over 2 decades of experience, YaeL helps families and entrepreneurs protect their wealth, minimize taxes, and create legal strategies that honor their value and legacy. She's appeared on ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, spoken at national conferences on cryptocurrency taxation, and is a passionate advocate for making the legal and financial world understandable for real people. Oh, and she's also a fierce mama of 3 daughters who knows exactly what it means to protect what matters most. Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. Welcome. And again, not only am I grateful that I get to share you with the world, I'm so grateful to call you a good friend right now. So I'm very, very honored for this experience. I'm so excited for what we get to create here. The last time we tried to do this, Zoom decided to go crazy and we get to do it again. So hi.
Hi.
So honored to have you here.
I am honored to be here.
You know, one of the things that I do is allow flow to happen. So I am going to allow flow to happen, but this is an area I'm not familiar with naturally in my own world of LLCs and taxes. And one of the reasons I wanted you here is whatever is in our space that blocks growth from happening is really huge. And so I want to address some myths about this area that help people ease into it and without being afraid. What are like one of the very first areas that people come to you and you're like, if you only knew this, you'd already start to feel better? Like, would that?
You know what? Without being more specific in terms of taxes, before we even get into businesses, the average taxpayer maybe that owes money to the IRS and they think, this bill is snowballing with interest and penalties and they're going to be able to chase me for life. That's a myth. The IRS only has 10 years to collect on the taxes that you owe that were assessed. So whatever you still owe on that 10th day anniversary, 10-year anniversary, they will write off that balance if they haven't collected it from you. So just because you have this huge balance that's been dragging on for years and you think, they're going to collect it till the day I die, that's a big myth.
So good to know. One of the things that I get afraid of is bookkeeping and organization. What is how do you even get started with organizing your life because it feels overwhelming. So what would be like, you do this, this, and this?
I'm a little old school.
I
use one of these. I have my clients use one of these, if they want to, just to stay organized, if you're not OCD. I had a client that had a binder of all of her receipts. So when she went for an audit, because she got picked for an audit randomly. She was very organized, dividers, color-coded, whatever it was. The auditor looked at 2, 3, 4 items, saw that she was organized, had everything he was asking for. I said, all right, we're done. You know, versus the client that comes with the shopping bag of a hodgepodge of receipts, completely disorganized. That auditor, I promise you, will go through every one of those receipts. Right? If he finds anything, he'll then be auditing the 2 years prior as well. Right? So I just use one of these. It helps a little bit to stay organized just with my business receipts. I know a lot of people are in the new techie age and they'll scan their receipts. They can do that too, but and I have some of those on the computer. I'm just that belt and suspenders kind of girl. I don't always, you know, trust that my computer won't die or something happens to the hard drive, whatever. So I always have the backup. But a lot of our, you know, credit cards, that's not good enough in an audit either. Just because you charged it on a credit card, that will not get you through an audit. They want to see the actual receipt from the store. They want the itemized. They want to know what you bought.
LLC, someone is brand new and they're a independent contractor where they're like a healer, a coach, mindset work. You're
Mhm.
brand new in this industry. How do you get yourself started?
Well, it's going to be state specific, depending where you live. You know, you're going to file that LLC, all the paperwork through the Department of State or whatever is the formation body in your state. Once you are officially formed, you then have to apply for your EIN number on the with the IRS. That's something that can be done online and is relatively quickly. You will then need to open up a bank account. So you'll need your formation documents and the EIN letter. Sometimes the IRS's website lets you print it out right then and there. Sometimes they'll mail it to you within 10 days. Haven't quite figured out why sometimes I apply for the EIN number and I get it right away and can print the letter as a PDF, and sometimes my client gets it in the mail. One of those little glitches with the IRS. Once you have that and your formation documents, then you go open up the bank account. And depending how many transactions you're going to have and how much income you think you're going to earn that year, I really encourage my clients to get QuickBooks or some other bookkeeping software, but QuickBooks is pretty much the most popular one, I think, QuickBooks Online. Most of them, you can connect your bank account, your business bank account, to QuickBooks. And so all the transactions download automatically, and then you're just going to put them in the, categorize them in the different categories, rent, car, postage, what have you. It makes it a lot easier for your tax preparer at the end of the year once you've reconciled, your QuickBooks with your your 12 bank statements for the year, that then you can just print out the profit and loss statement and you give that to your tax preparer and they prepare your tax return based on that P&L. So it makes it so much easier when you're organized and everything flows. When you're in resistance and you're not doing these steps and you're not in flow, it's stressful and you're not going to have a good outcome, and it's very stressful during tax season to then have to recreate what you need to create, what could easily have been done with software.
Absolutely. What are the things that you've seen that when people implement this, other than like, I love QuickBooks. I implemented QuickBooks and it changed my life. Is there anything along with that that also helps?
It really depends the business that you're in. I guess every business has their own industry specific tools that would help that business owner. I'm not really familiar. I don't see that end of it. I'm on the other end of the QuickBooks for tax planning and for tax season. So I would say, anybody that's in your industry, talk to people in your industry, find out what they're doing. I've learned so much from other tax professionals about what I could be doing better. And so I've implemented some of those things. You're constantly growing, the world is constantly changing, softwares are constantly changing, AI, certainly helps a lot in all the different industries now. So it's just talking to other people in your industry and finding out what they're doing.
And I think for me, it's interesting because I know that there's hairdressers who travel and teach in this industry. So do they create a completely different entity? Like if you're a hairdresser who teaches in salons, do you have to have two different businesses or because now I coach and I also do hair. Is that two completely different businesses, which I've
Yeah,
created, but then I started thinking, should I have done that?
they should be separate. You
Okay.
know, if you're just Louisa hairdresser, that's one business. Louisa coach in a completely unrelated industry to hairdressing should be a separate company.
But what if I do the coaching within the hair industry? For example, I do hypnosis while I'm doing hair appointments. Is that's where it gets like the gray area, and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you're running events for hairdressers, or for hairdressers or hair clients, could you put it through the hairdresser company, Louisa Hairdresser? Sure. But if you're going to be doing, just hypnosis on all different people in all different industries, I would just do a separate company.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I did separate it, and then I started thinking, did I complicate this? But I'm glad to know the answer to that. Um, Louisa as herself versus LLC or S Corp. How would someone decide?
That would depend upon how much Louisa is earning.
Okay.
Most people will start out, if it's just like a side hustle and they're making, maybe 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. No harm in doing it as a sole proprietor because you don't want to deal with the headaches that comes with running a more structured business. You're putting everything into your personal bank account, you're not hiring anybody. You don't have too much to lose. You have your own personal insurance as a hairdresser. Fine. Once you start netting 50, 60, 70,000 in profit, you know, um, not even in profit. I mean, for me, I've incorporated people for much less. It depends what they're looking for. Depends the industry. I want legal protection. I don't want my personal assets at risk if the company gets sued. I want the better tax structure. So, you know, Schedule Cs that are sole proprietors are more subject to audits than the S corps. The S corps now are catching up a little bit because the IRS wants to make sure that you're taking reasonable compensation as an officer of the company and paying your fair share of payroll taxes. But historically, people that run a sole proprietorship that use their home office and take that home office deduction and start claiming all of those home office deductions that are related to it, that's one of the most highly audited areas, highly audited deductions.
So I feel
So
like that used to be that case. Is it still that after COVID, being that more people were working from home?
yeah, I mean, people are still being audited. Has the percentage changed dramatically? Not really, not too much, not too badly. Like I said, they're now looking at the schedule at the S corps, for reasonable salaries. Um, once you're earning hundreds of thousands of dollars and you want to put in place more tax savings, more defined benefits for the company, for the employees, switching over to a Schedule C, I'm sorry, to a C corp would be more beneficial tax wise, right? Because the C corp pays a flat 21% tax. The S corp, closely held corp, you individually yourself, you'll get a K-1 reporting the profit of your business, and that reports on your personal income tax return, and that's based on your ordinary income tax rate. So if you're making, let's say, 600,000 in profit, 600,000 in profit, that's going to hurt more as an S corp on your personal tax return than if you had just paid the flat 21% tax as a C corp.
All of this for someone who's like, what?
Is when you have a tax professional that does tax planning, not just doing your tax return once a year. Most accountants, most people that go to H&R Block or try to do it themselves on TurboTax, you're not getting the benefit of tax planning. You're getting the benefit of tax filing.
That is huge because I remember just a few weeks ago we were in a conversation and someone said something that was mindset related and it was like negative conversation. I went, oh my God, my ears are bleeding. And because in that arena, I totally get what it's like to say things that don't work in your favor. And
Right.
then we started talking about where somebody doesn't have a YaeL helping and
Right.
they were overpaying in an area and you were like, now my ears are bleeding. And it really like enlightened me
Yeah.
to having zero awareness of that until now.
I mean, the example I gave you in our conversation was that psychologist client of mine who has been overpaying her self-employment tax for at least the last 10 years, at least by 25,000. Had she been structured properly, she wouldn't have been paying that. Had she been an S corp, I just made her an S corp. Moving forward now, she's going to be saving that $25,000 a year, flipping to the S corp, going on salary, and putting other things in place that we're going to put in place. So if she's working another 20 years, how much is that in savings? Right? A lot of money.
That's the thing. It didn't occur to me until I got to know you. This is again an area that was hard for me because if I don't understand it, then I pretend that it doesn't exist. And so I'm not alone in this, hence why it was very important that we air this and we educate. We like love educating the world in an area that has been kind of scary for me because I'm great at going out and making money. I'm fabulous at like, let's do this, the mindset, the this, the that. But then it occurred to me, there's a whole nother, we hire coaches to help with mindset, but like, great. How do you
If
protect
you're
your
making all this
assets?
money, how do you keep it?
Yeah. And just a couple days ago, being a hairdresser for 28 years, I hear everybody's life. Just a few days ago, somebody was talking about their car, and their business includes the car, and he didn't know you're supposed to register it a specific way. Handled one thing, another thing showed up, handled that, another thing showed up, and he goes, no one tells you even when you're handling what the next thing you're supposed to do is.
Right.
And he was in so much trouble for a while until he got it handled, but had to figure it out. And I think that it's like saying, can you please choose to stand up and sit down at the same time? When your mind is confused, you do nothing.
Right.
So the reason I like this conversation is so it can clarify a lot of the things that break it down so we're not so confused and we take action.
Right. I
Because
mean, the first thing, if you want to start a business, the first thing is meet with a professional. Talk to them about what your plans are, the scalability of your business, what you're looking to achieve so that we can plan the right structure from day one. If you don't have, what happens if you don't have the right foundation under a house?
bye-bye.
Right. So same thing with your business, right? You need to have that strong foundation. The structure is the foundation of your house. You running the business and growing, that's you're filling up the rooms, right? You just need to have it structured properly from day one and meet with someone, like find a tax professional that does tax planning. I do. We meet quarterly, so at the end of the first quarter, how'd you do? How much money did you make? Do you think you're going to make the same next quarter? Do you see more? Are you expanding? So that we can pivot, throughout the year, and not wait till December when the year's about to close and you've got a week or two and you're not going to be able to get anything in place, right? By then it's too late. The tax year's almost over and you got to file a corporate return in March. Meet quarterly, talk about, we flipped my client from an S corp to the C corp, at towards the end of the year in October because we knew he was planning on going from 800,000 in income to 1,600,000 this past year. We saved him hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. But I couldn't have done that if he came to me December 28th and said, hey, I made 1,600,000 this year. What do you want to
Right,
do? He killed in taxes this year. You
right,
know, we planned ahead, he purchased a vehicle for the business. We took, I think last year, the first year he bought the car, the rule was 80% bonus depreciation. He had only made one payment on the car, but the tax code allows you to take that bonus depreciation up front. Guess what happened the next year? We sold that car, flipped it, bought another one, took 60% depreciation because it's been going down by 20%, and they're there's talk about bringing it back to 100% bonus depreciation, locked in, but it hasn't happened yet. But planning, the first year was a Porsche SUV. Last year he bought the Lamborghini. We're talking about him purchasing an airplane for this next year and chartering it out to people, and depending on whether he needs to show a profit or a loss is depending how often he's going to rent out that plane to have, to a company for high-end wealthy people to hire chartered flights,
I
There's so
love
much you can do, retirement planning, um, benefits that you offer your employees, whatever it is to get that taxable number as close to zero as possible. But if you don't plan, you're going to plan to fail and get killed in taxes.
right.
Yeah.
And living in fear.
But
Like living in fear. Like when you don't know the rules and you don't know and you're barely figuring it out, you have this because you don't know, you live in fear of the what if.
yeah, like
And
people are afraid of like investment properties. If I could go back and change anything, and I teach my kids this, your first property should be a multi-unit property, whether it's a two-family home, a three-family, four-family. You live in one part of the house, you rent the others. The rent you collect will cover your mortgage on that property so that the money you're earning in your salary, I have a daughter who's graduating veterinary school, so that she saves her money. And then when there's enough equity in the property, she can tap into the equity of that property to put the down payment on the house that she really would like to live in. But don't buy your dream house first. It's a mistake.
I I remember interviewing a gentleman friend of mine, and the very first thing, as he was a recovering alcoholic, but a brilliant businessman. And I actually think they usually go hand in hand. I love how brilliant certain people are. And the very first thing he did was exactly that. He had just enough money to get back on his feet and he bought a property that he could rent one side. He wasn't even looking for just a home. He was looking, how can my home become an investment?
Right.
And I think we're the rest of us, well, not the rest of us, because I'm not like that either. I came from foreigners as my parents. So I was raised very differently with the mentality of, is this going to, in the big picture, what does this equal financially?
Right.
Um,
And that's the difference between the the working class, right? And the wealthy. The working class trade their time for money. You use that money with the mentality to just pay their bills. The wealthy people use their money to buy assets that generate income. So their money's making more money.
yes,
And that's the mindset difference.
absolutely. And I was actually just listening to a class and it was the 80-20, and I've heard this in very different areas.
Mm.
The this gentleman that I recently started to follow, he said he owns $1 billion company. He said, I always hire based on someone's mindset and not specifically their skill set. Because I could always teach them skill set, but their mindset's very important. So the 80-20, she was saying 80% is the work you put into your mindset, 20% is the work you actually execute. And I was like, that is amazing and powerful
Right.
because you can really generate. My son was 16 years old. He just got a job. He's now 19. Where he sits next to me in the car a month into working, he says, I've got to figure out how to not trade my time for money. I was like, I love you. You're brilliant. And the fun part about what he said was, I say it to friends, and half my friends are like, well, I guess he'll learn quickly. That is not how the world works. And I'm like, nope, it is actually. And I hope that he never does it differently. I hope he always thinks outside the box like that to create that.
Because
So
the population is doing it backwards.
exactly. So you have three daughters,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming you've done the same thing in pouring into all of them. Is it a personality thing, or is it like the way that you raise them that they get money consciousness?
Um, I've always run my own business, and my older girls, their father too. So they already have that mindset. I raise them with mama doesn't pay retail for anything. Mama pays wholesale for things. And if you don't ask, you don't get. So my youngest one's in college, we got the financial aid package. I'm like, no, I'm not accepting this. I'm going to appeal it. I did. We got another $12,000, right? If you don't ask, it's definitely a no. And so it's the mindset of manifesting things. I told you, my daughter just had surgery. She had to have a septoplasty. She wanted the rhinoplasty as well at the same time. One doctor said, well, the insurance covers the septoplasty. It'll be another 8,000 for the rhinoplasty. I'm like, no, I don't accept that. Went to a plastic surgeon that I knew, and he's like, oh, we can get this covered by insurance. Just let me handle it. And he did. Her surgery cost me a $50 copay.
And that is the difference I was saying to you. Like, that is the difference between knowing your things and not knowing your things.
But
And
just don't accept the first answer that somebody gives you. There's always another way. If your mindset, if you're set on having it a certain way and you can visualize it a certain way, it'll happen. Just put it out there and get out of your own way.
absolutely, absolutely. I am so grateful for us going through this. One of the things that I did, which I don't usually do, I decided to write down some questions because this is an area that I find very important. So I'm gonna read one of the questions.
Okay. But
What is
hopefully
your take?
for you.
I'm sorry.
Hopefully I'll have an answer for you or know the answer.
I am 100% confident with you. What is your take on separating business and personal finances, and how important is it really?
Okay, if you're going to have any sort of corporation, you have to separate business and corporation. Otherwise, if you muddy the waters, you're going to end up in a lawsuit potentially where they can pierce the corporate veil and get through that legal protection. So if you need money from the business to pay for something personal, an S corp, the beauty of it is, you have your income coming in, the expenses going out, you're taking your salary, but you also have the right to take distributions, which are not taxed with FICA. So you can do that. You just always have to make sure that your distributions that you take throughout the year total less than what you're taking in salary. Otherwise, the IRS will think that you're just taking distributions to avoid paying payroll taxes. Um, but it's super important to keep it. I have a client who just, no matter how many times I tell him this, he's constantly paying for personal expenses out of the business. I'm like, it's not that you can't take the money out of the business account as a distribution, put it in your personal, then pay for the personal thing. Just keep everything clean and separate.
What happens if you're doing business as yourself? Is that a okay enough place to play?
Yeah, I mean, doing business as yourself, if you don't have a separate business account and you're just putting everything into your personal, it's going to be that way, but you really should keep an accurate spreadsheet of business income coming in. And then, like you could have a day job and then your side hustle, right? But, if the side hustle is going to be the business, then you need to keep track in a spreadsheet of what's business income coming in and what are your business expenses so that you can give those to your tax preparer to put on the Schedule C. So even though you're using the same bank account, you should still keep at least the numbers straight and separate somewhere else, right?
So
Um,
playing devil's advocate.
I
I
would
get
say your business bank account though. I think it's just easier. I don't like it when you're mixing your business with your personal. Makes it, God forbid you ever get audited, it's much easier and cleaner to say, here are the business bank statements, here are the, business income went in, business expenses went out.
yeah. Nowadays, everybody has a zillion hustles. That's going to be a whole bunch of accounts.
Well, it depends what those hustles are and whether that, just keep if you have a day job, right? That goes, your paychecks go on your personal. Your side hustles, you can put it into a separate business account, even if it's all your businesses,
Mhm.
if you don't want to open, it depends how many side hustles you have, but so
Yeah.
what, at least they're clean, and everything you need, income and expenses are in each individual bank statements, for different accounts. It's much easier to deal with an audit or preparing your taxes if each side hustle is separate, because each side hustle is typically going to be its own Schedule C on your personal tax return, because if they're in different industries completely, like if you're doing DoorDash or Uber Eats, that's one. If you're doing hair and makeup on the side, that's another. We need to categorize them on your tax return based on industry business codes. So they
Right.
have separate. So you're just creating more work for yourself if you just throw it all into one business bank account.
Totally. Okay. Is there a simple mindset shift you'd offer to people who feel overwhelmed or scared by money and legal terms or legal any of this? Like, is there a simple mindset shift?
Mindset shift. Accept the fact that you don't know it all, right? Don't be overwhelmed by it. Create a team. You know, you have your doctor for your health. You need your team of professionals or professional, at least for your business. You know, you wear 3 hats when you run your own business, right? You're the technician. So if you're going to open up your own hair salon, you're like, I know how to do hair, but you also need to be the business manager. You also have to be the entrepreneur, the rainmaker that brings in the business. You know your limitations. You're not necessarily, everybody says, oh, I know how to do hair. I should open up my own salon and make most of the money instead of just, renting a chair in someone else's salon. But do you know how to be the business manager? Do you know how to do the marketing to be the entrepreneur to bring in the clients, the new clients?
Right.
Hate what you don't know how to do.
People have asked me for my entire career, why haven't I opened up my own salon? And I, it wasn't something that I felt qualified in. And I thought if I did that, right now I only have responsibility of my one chair.
Mhm.
But now I would be responsible for the entire salon in a business that I didn't understand because most hairdressers that open up salon, they're artists. And now they're in the business world pretending to be owners. And all of a sudden, everything's falling apart because just like when you're a kid and you're like, if I'm a parent, I'm going to do it this way. And then all of a sudden, you become a parent and you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
this is not quite what I signed up for.
Right.
So,
There was that example I told you of my hair salon after 25 years that I went to at closing because one partner died and then the second partner carried on until he died unexpectedly. There was no succession planning. Even his daughter, who was a colorist working in that salon, she couldn't take it over because he didn't put into place any legal documents for her to continue on. She didn't have access to the bank accounts. She wasn't on the lease, nothing. They had no plan in place. And when I tell people, if you're opening up a business, you need to have a plan in place. God forbid something happens to you. If you want someone else to take over, if you're partners with someone and that partner dies, is there something in place where is their spouse going to be your new business partner? There should be a succession plan, an operating agreement that talks about what happens if one partner wants out or if one partner dies.
right.
What happens, you know?
So
Every
you're not in the same state as me. What if somebody like me wants to hire someone who's not in the same state? How does that work?
So in terms of the taxes, I mean, I can certainly incorporate a business in any 50 states. That's not a big deal. I can do the taxes for it. I can do the payroll for it. Those are all things that I can do. Legal documents, like estate planning, succession planning, that's all going to be very state specific. So you need to work with an attorney, a business attorney or an estate planning attorney in your state to at least put that plan in place. But structuring the business and all that I can still do.
Amazing. Like, you know what I love about you? You really do make it so physically comfortable to receive this information. And as soon as I met you and we started talking about something that normally makes me very uncomfortable, my body was able to receive this information and go, I'm okay. And so I love that you know your information. I love that you make it so easy to digest. I love that you are so knowledgeable and specific opinion, very trustworthy. And I'm sure everybody's going to feel that too for themselves. But for me, like my body feels very, very comfortable. And I am also extra impressed that you raised 3 amazing children along with doing this and becoming so knowledgeable in the way that you execute it. Because every time I ask you questions, it's like breathing for you, your comfort level around it.
But this is, I do this day in, day out. You asked me to do my hair, look how frizzy it is. I stress out because I can't blow out my own hair the way my hairstylist does it, you know? So what's, this is what I do on the daily. So it's comfortable to me. I deal with clients, IRS problems. They are stressed out, owing 50,000, 100,000, 500,000. They're a mess. And I just bring them back to the peace of mind because I'm taking over your headache. I'm taking over your stress. You do what you're good at. I'm going to solve your tax issue. Same thing. Somebody sits in your chair, they have to go somewhere, their hair needs to be a specific way. They're stressed out. I'll never be able to do it, but they come to you, you're going to make them
Right.
beautiful.
Absolutely. I literally, it is my greatest pleasure of knowing what I do. And sometimes when people come to me and they've looked up all of the things and they're like telling me things that they figured out on YouTube, I'm like, where do you get this information? Are you kidding me? And so is that how you feel when people look up information and they have zero idea what they're talking about and they're telling you what to do?
So, hey, listen, sometimes the stuff they find on the internet, off the IRS's website is true, but other times it's like they don't understand the nuances. I just met with a client before this podcast. They spoke to the revenue officer assigned to their case. They pissed him off, for lack of a better word. They're The IRS revenue officers are happy when there's an attorney on the case, right? Because they know the case is going to move. They know that they're going to get what they need. They know that the case is going to move forward and get resolved. They don't like chasing taxpayers who are hiding. They don't like chasing taxpayers who are frozen in fear, because they're going to miss deadlines. It's just so much more stressful for them. I never, ever allow my clients to speak to the representatives at the IRS themselves because you're unwittingly, in your honesty and authenticity, going to give them the roadmap to your finances. Not that they don't already know. He's like, oh, he wanted to know our houses. He wanted to know the cars we drive. I'm like, they know these things already. He's checking to see if you're lying, right? Because they have access to DMV databases. They know what cars you're driving,
Right.
what's registered in your name. They have access to property records. They know what properties in your state, in your county that you own.
Yeah.
You know, You'd be surprised how much they know and how much they can find out from the post office and how much from DNB and, property records across the country. They're using AI now to be more efficient with less workers, right? In their collection actions, in reviewing the returns if they think that something looks fishy or red flag to pull you for audit.
Right. So I have a friend, this was quite a while ago. He had a liquor store and he got audited. And when you hear a story that's not really yours, but you hear from somebody else, it's way more traumatic by the time it gets to you. So my experience of what happened from the way the story was told, all his accounts were frozen and he couldn't continue paying his bills and he lost everything because during the time of his audit, everything was frozen. Is that something that could happen? Like, could the freezing of your accounts has you not pay your bills and not pay your employees because everything's frozen? Is that?
Yes, but to get to that point, he would have received many, many notices of taxes due and ignored them.
Oh,
I
see, I
have
hear stories
they,
like this and
they
I
don't
don't
open
sleep.
the mail. They don't open the mail. They're frozen when they get mail from the IRS, a certified letter. Like when you first file your tax return and you owe money, they will send you the first bill. Hey, here's the bill of what you owe. 30 days later, they'll send you a second reminder of balance due. 30 days later, if you've ignored them again, you'll get a notice of intent to levy. They have to wait 30 days. They'll send you a, hey, final notice of intent to levy. They legally have to wait 30 days. And at that point, they can garnish your wages, levy your bank account, put a tax lien against all your property. You've ignored them for 4 months.
Got it. I love when I hear part of a story or like however they tell the story, and then I choose to spend my time stressing over things that aren't true.
Yeah.
So thank you for breaking that down for me.
I mean, they've ignored them to get to that point. It's not their desire to levy you. You can call them up. We can set up payment plans. We can set up partial payment plans. We can do offers and compromises if you qualify. settling for, like they say on the TV commercials, pennies on the dollar. Do they happen? Yes. About 36% of offers are accepted, but I don't file offers that I don't believe are going to get accepted or have a reasonably good chance of being accepted, because I don't want to waste my time doing them to get a negative result. I like to under promise and over deliver, and I don't want to waste my client's money. You
Right.
know,
Right.
I have a great track record. I'd like to keep my track record.
I hear you. I always say I work with some of the best because on purpose, I pick the best and then I get to show off that they're amazing. And I like to keep that going.
Yeah. And I don't listen. I don't like the national tax companies because they're just salesmen, right? And do they do some of the work? Yes. But the problem is they're going to charge you high fees and I think, yeah, we could file an offer and compromise. Here's $14,000 you have to pay us to do this offer and compromise. I don't even consider the offer until my clients have paid me to do their financials, because those financials will tell me whether you qualify or not. But they're just a national company looking to make money. I sort of, yes, I want to make money, but I also have this desire to help people and give them back their peace of mind, right? So I'm not going to charge you up front for something I'm not even sure I can do yet, right?
That's amazing. That is truly amazing.
You have to know your client. Every offer and compromise is based on a case-by-case basis. No two people have the same financial picture. So you got to
Right.
know what you're working with first before to know whether they qualify. And the other key is, if you owe money to the IRS, if you have assets, rule of thumb, if you have assets that are worth more than what you owe them, you are not going to qualify. So don't pay anybody to do an offer. If you owe 50,000, but you've got $500,000 equity in your house.
That is golden information. Do you know how many people would not have told the truth on that? Pay, get paid to represent someone
And
and then
says,
be
oh,
like,
your offer was denied. We can try
oh,
another offer if you'd like. Do you want to offer them more? Pay more money. They're salesmen. I've had many clients come to me after dealing with, national tax companies. I won't name names. I don't want to get sued.
I mean, I feel that way about people who I remember this gentleman saying, Louisa, how do you know your coaching lands for people? And I said, Based on results. People tell me that I did this and they got this." He goes, "Well, you're never going to make it." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "That's not scalable. You can't grow if you care about each and every single person making it. So like you give them the work and if they do it, it's on them. They don't, it's on them. But like how you scale is you're able to generate all of these clients but you can't be concerned about each and every one making it." And I was like, well, then
I
I'm
did.
not scaling on that level that you're talking about then, because I am committed to each person not wasting their money with me. I look at each person and just exactly like what you said for me, I'm like, what you pay me, that is your family's money that is going to be taken out of what they get to live on for I hope you do the work. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And so I mean, if anyone, I'm literally going to cut that clip out because if anyone gets anything out of today, that is golden information. Every single thing you've shared is helping someone sleep through the night. One of the things, as a hypnotherapist, people come to me because they can't sleep. But why they can't sleep is because all of this is hovering over everyone's head.
Yeah. I mean, I've had people tell me I've saved their marriages, their homes, their businesses. I've had husband and wife sitting down. She's like, this is his problem. I pay my taxes because I'm a W-2 nurse at a hospital. I pay my taxes through my paycheck. He created this problem, but they were at risk of losing their home because
Right.
of it.
Right. I had a client whose husband, they owed $400,000 in taxes, and he had no intentions of paying for it. And it ended up being split between the two of them during their divorce. But if he didn't pay for it, she still owed it.
Yeah, for sure. However, I have a similar story where I had a client who had a side hustle. He was running a security company and made a lot of money, owed a lot of taxes. I think they owed close to $1.2 million in taxes. As a couple, they didn't qualify for the offer in compromise. But then this problem led them to the demise of their marriage. They got divorced. Individually, even though the wife was still equally responsible, based on her income alone, I was able to get her out of the tax debt by doing an offer in compromise. So out of the 1,400,000, I think she paid, if I remember correctly, about 22,000. And she was free and clear with the IRS.
Wow.
He still had the tax liability, and we were still working through his resolution. But sometimes, you know how they give those examples in the hospitals, your spouse is ill and, medical bills are piling up, and they suggest that the couple get divorced so that one spouse doesn't end up with the medical debt. This is a similar situation. Sometimes what you can do separately, it won't work out for you if you're still married.
Amazing information. I remember I was,
Marriage is a business.
yeah.
You know, people like to get lost in the romance of it all. And yes, that's the commitment, let's say before God, source, whoever, you make that commitment to. But legally, a marriage is a business transaction. You've got different benefits if you're married versus if you're single or head of household.
So I have a question on that. What if you're the children and your parent passes or your parent accumulates all this debt because they didn't plan for their future? Are the children liable for their parents'
The
debt?
estate, the estate is liable. So when you make a will and you pass and your parents die with some assets, the debts, the funeral expenses get paid first, and then the debts of the estate, the debts of the person who passed has to be paid out of the estate before any beneficiary could get any piece of the pie.
What if there is no will, no money, just debt?
It kind of dies with them.
Oh, okay. I thought like the kids end up having a parent pay the parents' debt.
No, not generally. His spouse sometimes is different, depending what debt it is, but the children aren't liable for their parents' debt.
I'm so happy to know that. Thank
But if they have debt, they should come to me because I have the accelerated debt payoff program. So I can help them pay off their debt and minimize the amount of interest they pay on their mortgage, on their credit cards, on their student loans, on their personal loans. We reverse engineer the interest rates so that instead of all the interest being paid up front to the bank for the first 15 years of your mortgage, you're paying more towards principal. So
I am I want to move in with you. I want to live with you.
yeah, this way I can have my hair done every day.
I used to have a client who let me travel with her all over the world for 10 years, and all I had to do was her hair, which I'm very, very good at, but like it was the biggest blessing of my life. And I would choose you any day because the imp over a chef, over massages, over anything, you bring me peace of mind that, I mean, I know Brian and I are going to arm wrestle for you, but like I'm willing to go there.
50 bedrooms in this house. There's room for you.
I'm coming. It is. It like, I swear, this helps me sleep. This information calms my mind enough to get in. For example, I do know people in my personal life who tell me their parents live on Social Security. And they're married and they both couldn't qualify for so many things because it was just like they were off by a little, but there was they have no financial support to actually ask an attorney this information, right? And so they're suffering. And if they pass, the kids are like, what are we gonna do with their debt? So this was causing,
I mean,
um,
the credit card companies can't come after the kids.
okay, thank
Yeah.
God.
They end up writing it off anyway. The credit card companies, it's a write-off on their books. Write-off is bad debt or whatever.
And even for how to live when, by the grace of God, my parents have always made sure when my grandparents died, they realized what it cost to do a funeral, to purchase plots and do all of those things. They specifically went out, and this is the other very important question that I want to ask you, because my parents did. And a lot of the stuff that I've learned are just from mistakes and stuff I've gone through, witnessing my family go through it. So when they lost everything at some point, they bought life insurance because they thought they were going to die. They were so terrified of leaving us with their debt that they bought life insurance for us to live if they ended up dying. But the life insurance policy was like, you only pay for 7 years and then you have the policy. They ended up paying for 20 something years because it wasn't seven, and the insurance person who sold them the policy lied. And they ended up, at some point, it had like accumulated $25,000 on a $50,000 policy. And they pretty much paid 25.
Mm.
And now they're in their 70s and they sold it and like collected their 25,000 each and they put it in the bank, which they could have invested differently. How do you protect yourself from something that blatantly stupid?
Yeah, it's tough. Life insurance salesmen scare me. Listen, when I didn't know any better when I was younger, I got into policies that the only person making the money was the life insurance salesman, on the initial premium and then the renewals every year. And I was in policies at the time when I was younger that weren't growing very fast in cash value. You know, it's why I put together a team. I have teams of financial advisors and other people in my network that I trust that work the way I do, that have my clients' best interest. I don't ever make a referral to someone that I haven't used myself in some capacity,
Mhm.
um, just because I'm very protective of my clients and not getting scammed, because I had a referral early on where a salesman put one of my clients into some policy that was going to be, she was in her 60s. She was turning 70 this year, but this was years ago. Put her in some policy of like $14,000 a year premium that there's no way she could have afforded. She had inherited some money and was able to put the policy in place the first year, but there was no forethought as to how she was going to continue this policy year after year. She was living on a fixed income.
Right.
So I was very upset. I ended ties with that a financial advisor years ago, and I'm super protective of my clients. And, I go with them to some of these meetings because I don't want them getting scammed. And I participate, with the advisor as a team. And we look, at the client, not just at this one moving piece, but, you zoom out 30,000 feet and look at the whole thing at a macro level. You know,
Right.
you can't just sell someone life insurance without knowing all the other moving parts of their financial picture.
Absolutely.
Goals are, right? So it's looking at everything together. And as a team approach, we're all there, me as the tax planner, the financial advisor, estate planning attorney, if they're elderly, because I don't do the elder care, elder care law, Medicaid planning is a completely separate niche than just the basic planning you would have if you were, a young family just starting out. Uh,
Right.
so I put together a team and we meet as a team. Wonderful Zoom, we could all be part, and or sometimes we meet in person depending where they are. But we talk about what their goals are. Everybody needs to know what their freedom number is. That's a line I took for another advisor of mine. What's your freedom number? When you retire, how much do you need to live on per year to maintain the lifestyle that you want to live?
Right.
Right? And is there longevity in your family? So what's your freedom number? And we got to figure out where you are now at point A and how we're going to get you to point B. In how many years do you have to get to that? Without knowing that number, how could we plan accordingly in what investment vehicles to put you in to help you get that goal? What do you need to change about your lifestyle now to be able to have the lifestyle that you want when you retire?
Right. It's so funny. It just like made me think of when you go to buy a car and they're like, "What's your budget?" I'm like, I don't want to overpay for the car. That's my budget. I don't want to overpay for the car. Like, what is the lowest I could pay on something? And so I remember someone saying to me, this one was really hard for me because you and I last talked about the IUL versus other investments for children. Because again, I do hair for a living. I'm a hypnotherapist. This is not my world. So if someone's going to sell me an IUL, I want you to know the thing that you think is best for me and and then explain to me why.
Right. You need to understand the why. If you don't understand the why, and double check it against another advisor or someone that you trust, or talk to someone you trust. Does this make sense? This is what they told me,
Right.
right? do your homework, be informed. And that's what I do. I'm trying to educate and empower women. Typically, this is why I want to do those retreats. Typically women have been either at home with the kids or they are running a career, but their husbands are the one that they're happy to just handle the finances. But then something happens to that husband and the women are lost, right? Died unexpectedly. My client woke up to find out, oh, their house was in foreclosure. He didn't tell her and they owed 226,000 in taxes. She didn't know until the bank was wanting to, lock up her house and the IRS was looking to seize things. She didn't know. Another client of mine, she didn't know her financial advisor husband was running a Ponzi scheme until the FBI raided the house and arrested him. She didn't know that they owed all this money in taxes, you know? And
Yeah.
they're lost and they don't know what they have or where it is. Even if you're letting your spouse take the lead and handle that, the women need to be equally involved in the conversation. Know what assets you have, know where they are, know what insurance policies you have, know where your investments are located, where the statements are. Even if he's handling it, be informed, be
Absolutely.
an active participant in every area of your marriage.
Absolutely. I mean, last week I went to a funeral, and on my way to the funeral, my sister and I were talking, and it occurred to me that God forbid anything happened to my parents, I don't know where the paperwork is to what I do. And there's a part of me that's like, I don't want to know because I don't want to be thinking about that happening to my parents. But at the same time, I have to know. It's exactly what you just said. Like, you have to know this information because it is life and death, really.
Yeah, when I do an estate plan for somebody, they're not just getting the document. They could be getting the document all the documents on a flash drive, but I create a binder for them. Everything is in that binder and everything has those sheet protectors where you can slide things in between,
I
right?
love them.
So I have it divided, your will, your trust, your healthcare proxy, your living will, your Alzheimer's and dementia advance directive, um, a list of, it's a sheet that I give where they can list their personal property that they want to give to specific people because the stuff that's in your house, that doesn't necessarily go in your will unless you're leaving my coin collection, my gun collection, whatever it is. But most of the time, specific jewelry or specific picture or specific piece of furniture, you usually just make a list for that. I put that there. I give them extra protectors, dividers, so that I say, here, in here, you're going to put your life insurance policy. In here, you're going to put, other information. List who your financial advisor, have a document that has all of your accounts with the numbers, for your kids, my social media accounts, username, password. Like I had a spouse who died, my client, and his wife was locked out of his phone. She was locked out of his Zelle account, the Venmo account, to be able to continue paying some of the therapists in his practice. Thankfully, I had advised him to put her on the bank account, the business bank account, so she was at least able to continue that. But you don't even think like she didn't have the password to his phone because it was like his facial recognition and the password. Your social media accounts, you want to be able to shut those down.
Oh my goodness.
you know, I teach my clients about cryptocurrency. Like if your executor or your kids don't know how to, have the information to your cryptocurrency, you could be sitting on hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars that you don't have access to.
Absolutely. That is going to be our next conversation because I was hoping we would lead to there, but we learned a lot about a lot of things. But I want to have you back and literally have a very specific conversation just on crypto because that is the next golden ride.
I mean, we haven't had a new asset class in like 1600 years. So this is you, and you're never going to see this in your lifetime again. This time right now is the greatest shift in generational wealth that you're ever going to see. And we're really at the early adoption phase. This is like cryptocurrency now, although it's a little late to get rich on Bitcoin, but there's so many other real world, problem solving cryptos that are 16 cents, 10 cents, $2, you could still make a lot of money on. And this is like that moment when you're looking back and, oh, I had the opportunity to buy Apple or Google or Amazon or Tesla
Right.
and we're still, every time there's an adoption curve, it's that curve like that S, right at that base of that curve. By the time there's mass adoption and everybody understands is into it, it's too late.
Yeah.
This is the time.
I cannot wait to dig into that one because I think this is the foundation. We needed this,
Yeah.
right? Like this is very foundational, very, very necessary. And next time I would love to open up that arena because
Our whole financial system is changing behind the scenes, and people don't really know what's going on and what's already been built. The rails of the new infrastructure have been built. And things are going to change rather quickly within the next, we're in 2025, by 2028, 2030, you're not even going to recognize the world we live in. Um,
I am
Everybody's so
seeing,
distracted by, you know, the Met Gala, P. Diddy, all the different news stories going on. They're all distractions. They're all distractions from what's actually happening behind the scenes.
I say that all the time, and I just have a very physical awareness of what happens, and I am very aware it's a distraction, but I love like you're nailing it,
Yeah.
right? And I can't wait to learn the things that will launch us from someone who is very aware of this information. So thank you, thank you, thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for being you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I
My
love
pleasure.
love educating and empowering women, men too, but really I have a soft spot for really helping educate and empower women. I think we're going to be taking over the world.
I know we are. I love that. And I am looking forward to the retreats.
Yeah, for sure.
Love you all. Have a great, beautiful day.